Para continuar con las conferencias magistrales de este primer día de Finanzas Sustentables MX21, tenemos a continuación una conferencia con Sean Kidney, cofundador y director de Climate Bonds Initiative, una ONG internacional que trabaja para movilizar capital global para la acción climática. Sean ha participado en muchos proyectos con el Consejo Consultivo de Finanzas Verdes y estamos muy agradecidos de tenerlo con nosotros desde el Reino Unido. Bienvenido, Sean. Es un gusto tenerte en este evento.
Hi, I'm Sean Kidney. I'm the CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative. You know, we have enormous challenges. Recently at COP26, I was getting briefings from the IPCC, from other scientists, about how the Arctic Ocean is melting way faster than anyone thought, how we're beginning to experience climate change, wildfires around the world, even in Siberia, droughts and floods. And the pandemic. We now know very clearly that the pandemic was a result of biodiversity destruction, deforestation, the impacts of climate change, reduced habitat for bats, forced them together, pathogens jumping between species and then to us as humans. The IPCC Health Committee has been predicting that we're going to get pandemics throughout the 21st century for many years now. This is the first big one. There will be more. Now, what that means is the impacts of climate change, which have started, are not just increased sea level rise and flooding in Yucatan or droughts in northern Mexico, but they are also wildfires and social and economic hits as a result of things like the pandemics, brutal, tough ones where our loved ones die because of the impact we're having on the planet. It started. We have to prepare. We have to start changing our infrastructure, preparing our health system, and ensuring that we have the financial sector stabilizers in place to be able to bounce back when we have these kinds of shocks. Of course, we have some good news coming through. Apart from the fact we know what to do, it is about shifting to clean energy, clean transport, sustainable agriculture. We now see the rich countries of the world committing to change. At the Biden Climate Summit in April, all the major economies of the world, or the rich countries, committed to strong 2030 targets. 2050, yes, but it's the 2030 ones that count. We need to reduce global emissions by 55% by 2030. And now we have Europe, the US, Canada, Japan, Korea, the UK, even China committing to strong targets. The change has begun. Investors we speak to around the world are absolutely certain now that the shape of the future will be clean and green. We'll see dramatic changes in energy, transport, cities, agriculture. The only question is how quickly it's going to happen. Of course, that's a big bet. If we're too slow, we lose the chance to avoid catastrophic climate change. If we do it quickly enough, we will still have climate change. We have to prepare, but we'll also have an extraordinary period of investment in solutions. Think of it as Keynesian stimulus on steroids, a boom. $90 trillion of investment is required to achieve a clean, green, resilient society by 2050. That's the biggest investment pipeline in the history of humanity. We know that when we invest in infrastructure and these kinds of investments we create jobs. And in fact, the World Energy Outlook, produced by the International Energy Agency just a couple of months ago, last month, in fact, showed very clearly in the first major modeling that the shifting just in energy to clean and green would create more jobs than the existing paths and create higher GDP than the existing path. The future is rosy if we shift. We know investors want to invest. We've seen the growth of the green bond market. We've seen, of course, green bonds from many issuers in Mexico, including Mexico City. It's now standing at $1.6 trillion US globally. The green and sustainable bonds market, including Mexico's sovereign SDG bond, is now sitting at $2.5 trillion outstanding. That is a big growth from when I was first in Mexico City, when we had about 5 billion outstanding total. This year, the market will grow 80% globally. It will keep growing next year. What is this about? It shows, it's proof that investors want to invest and will invest. When the European Commission came to market recently with their sovereign green bond, AAA, they placed 12 billion euros and they had 130 billion euros of orders for that bond. That is double, more than double anything they've ever seen before with ordinary European bonds. That's the green flavor. And that's the same wherever you go. We've got price appearing in many markets now, in Europe, in US dollars, in Chilean pesos, even in Russian rubles. The deputy mayor of Moscow reported to me recently that they got a 20 basis points lower interest rate for their first Moscow green bond. It's everywhere. Why? Because investors think this is lower risk. They think that people that are properly addressing the change that's coming through, the wave they can see coming, are lower risk rather than higher risk. As a result, in the secondary market, green bonds perform better than ordinary markets. That puts pressure, downward pressure on price. There's more happening too. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Australian government, not known for its good climate policies, released a report where in the back of the report, they explained that if Australia didn't adopt net zero policies, as now expected by countries around the world, their borrowing costs would go up because the extent of investor demand for green was depressing prices for green, but also increasing prices for those organizations, those entities, those governments who were not adopting climate policies. They were now seen to be higher risk in the context of the change sweeping through the global economy. They predicted they would have 100 to 150 basis points higher interest rates. This, by the way, is for a AAA bond. Imagine how that spread is wider at lower bonds. Stuff is happening. But of course, the green bond market is really just an indicator of what we need to do. What we really need to do is now create greater demand to sate this or greater supply to sate this demand. There are so many investors out there. We need more energy, clean energy investments. And by the way, unfortunately, the IPCC and also the International Energy Agency tell us that gas is not green. In the International Energy's World Energy Outlook, produced just last month, they said very clearly, to meet our global climate targets, there can be no new fossil fuels. This is a pain in the neck because most countries in the world have been planning to shift to gas as a transition from coal. But what they're saying now is the reductions we have to achieve are so sharp, the window to do gas has closed. It's too late. We now have to leapfrog through to renewable energies and other kinds of ways of creating power. Now, there's a long and complicated discussion we can have about how to achieve a clean grid, but we're not talking about closing down the existing infrastructure. We don't need to deal with intermittency in the next 10 years. We simply need to start making sure everything new meets what the future needs, is future fit. Now, we need bankers now to start developing the programs to bring energy, transport, agriculture, green buildings, all these kinds of investments to market for the finance sector. We need the finance sector and regulators and others to talk to government about what government can do and needs to do to support the creation of these investments that will allow societies to grow. And we need to look at resilience. In Mexico, across LATAM, we've got to be thinking about the kind of investments that will make our societies stronger in the face of a 21st century of howling winds and wild storms and floods and droughts, which is what we're going to have now, not to mention the pandemics. What have we learned? Well, we do need to improve the ports at Veracruz and Acapulco. We know we do need to ensure water infrastructure is in place to better deal with droughts in areas that are currently dry. We also need to know that our social protections are better. We need to address inequality. And this is one thing where the mission of addressing climate resilience is exactly one with the mission of the Mexican government to reduce inequality, to support the poor, so that when these big waves of change come through, we don't leave the poor behind. We can't afford to. The pandemic teaches us that. At the very minimum, if they can't get income, can't get health support when the pandemic, they will have to keep working, and that will mean the disease will spread. There are many other reasons to address this issue. We've got to grow education, especially of women. When women participate in the economic life of the economy as a result of education, we get improved measures of equality, and we get a whole lot of other benefits like health benefits out of it. You start to see the agenda for resilience is not just physical. It's the agenda of equality and fair and equitable development. This is next year's work. It's not next decade's work. It's stuff we have to move on now. I applaud the Mexican government's SDG and sustainability bond. I applaud the work to be done in future on greening our economy. We do need to address the mitigation as well as resilience. But above all, we just need deals. Guys, I have so many investors hanging out for deals from Mexico, from Chile, from Colombia, from around the world. There is no shortage. For example, when Indian issuers go to Europe to place deals for renewable energy, they get the lowest interest rates they've ever achieved. When Russian railways placed 2 bonds, certified climate bonds, in the European market, they got the lowest interest rates ever achieved by a Russian entity. That's the prize, the short-term prize. And the real prize is we create a future for our children. What's not to like? Now we need the Mexican financial sector. Thanks for hearing me out, and I'm looking forward to a flood of green bonds.